When you're weighing a gaming desktop, the first question most of us ask is, who will actually get the most out of this rig, who can safely walk away, and does the price make sense for a typical gamer who just wants solid performance without breaking the bank? If you're standing at the crossroads of I need something that'll run the latest titles smoothly and I don't want to spend my rent on a PC, the Asus ROG GM700 with the Ryzen 5 8400F, 16GB of RAM, and a 1TB NVMe SSD might be the answer, or it might be a detour. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been looking at a lot of pre-built gaming PCs lately, and what keeps popping up in the conversations on forums and Reddit is the fear of overpaying for a system that looks great on paper but ends up throttling when you hit 3 games at once, or when you start streaming your sessions. The GM700 is marketed as a ready-to-play box, which is a promise that carries both convenience and risk. The convenience part is obvious. You get a Windows 11 machine that's already wired, so you can plug it into your monitor, connect a headset, and be in a game within minutes. The risk lies in the components you're actually getting for the price tag, especially the GPU and the CPU. The Ryzen 5 8400F is a 6-core, 12-thread processor that sits nicely in the middle of the current generation. It's capable of handling most modern games at 1080p, but you'll start to feel its limits if you push into 1440p or try to run demanding titles like Cyberpunk 2077 with max settings and ray tracing on. The Radeon RX 9060 XT is a solid mid-range card, but it's not a flagship. It will handle esports titles and many AAA games at medium-high settings, yet you'll need to compromise on ultra textures or high frame rates if you want the smoothest experience. So, who should buy this? If you're a gamer who mainly enjoys titles that don't demand massive GPU horsepower, think Fortnite, Valorant, Apex Legends, or even slightly older AAA releases like Red Dead Redemption 2, this machine will feel snappy. The 1TB NVMe SSD eliminates the dreaded loading screens that plague HDD-based builds, and the 16GB of RAM means you won't be swapping memory when you have a couple of background tabs open alongside your game. The Gigabit Ethernet port also ensures that your online matches stay stable, which is a real plus over some Wi-Fi-only pre-built options that can suffer from latency spikes. On the other hand, if you're the type of player who insists on max settings, 1440p or 4K resolutions, or you plan to record and stream at the same time, you'll probably feel the strain. The 9060 XT can handle 1080p well, but pushing it into higher resolutions will quickly hit a ceiling. A more demanding workload like video editing or running multiple virtual machines would also expose the Ryzen 5 8400F's limitations compared to a Ryzen 7 or an Intel i7 counterpart. In short, the system is a great fit for casual to mid-level gamers, but anyone looking for a future-proof, high-end workstation should keep looking. Let's talk about the practical strengths that become apparent once the box is opened. First, the SSD. A 1TB PCIe 4.0 drive isn't just about capacity, it's the speed that translates into game worlds loading in seconds rather than minutes. I tested a fresh install of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and the initial load time was under 30 seconds, a noticeable improvement over the 2-minute waits many report on older HDD rigs. The 16GB RAM is another real-world win. Modern games increasingly use more memory for texture streaming, and having that headroom means you can keep a Discord voice chat or a browser tab open without the game hitching. The Ethernet port is also a hidden gem. I've seen pre-built PCs rely entirely on Wi-Fi, which can be a headache in apartment buildings with congested airwaves. Plugging the GM700 directly into the router gave me consistently low ping, an advantage that shows up in competitive shooters where every millisecond counts. Now for the practical weaknesses, things that might not scream on the spec sheet but matter in day-to-day use. The first is the GPU's cooling solution. The 9060 XT is tucked into a fairly compact chassis, and while Asus claims the system stays quiet under load, real-world stress tests with games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider pushed the fans into a noticeable hum. If you're sensitive to noise, especially in a shared living space, you may find the cooling louder than a typical console. Secondly, the power supply is not user replaceable. The GM700 comes with a 500W unit that's adequate for the current configuration. But if you ever consider upgrading the GPU to something like a Radeon 7900 XT or an NVIDIA RTX 4070, you'll run into power headroom issues. Upgrading the PSU would involve opening the case, which isn't as straightforward as swapping a card in a custom build. Lastly, the system doesn't include any extra SSD slots or drive bays. If you accumulate a large library of games or want a dedicated drive for media, you'll need to rely on external storage.